when it comes down to it, our pets just end up eating things sometimes that they shouldn't. So I've had a couple times in my life. Once years ago, I helped my roommate's dog, and then recently I had something happen with one of my dogs, and I had to induce vomiting. So if your dog does ingest something like, for example, antifreeze, you want to get that taken care of as soon as possible. And so you would want to try to induce vomiting, if it's within a couple hours, as soon as possible. Also chocolate, let's say, years ago my roommate's dog ate a big bar of chocolate. And of course right away I called my vet. And the vet told me to induce vomiting and told me to use hydrogen peroxide and chicken stock. And it worked like a charm. The dog was throwing up within 15 minutes and was fine after that. We had no issues. But we caught it early, we noticed the dog had eaten the bar, and we just got to it right away. You always want to call your veterinarian because there are certain things that your pet can ingest. One second, they're barking outside. Okay, so there are certain elements, chemicals, things like that, that your dog might ingest, and it wouldn't be a good idea to have induced vomiting on your own. For example, if they ingest something like gasoline, when they're vomiting, it has the ability to do even more damage on the way out or the way up. So you always want to make sure that you call your vet before. Usually with a food, if it happens quickly, inducing vomiting right away is what your vet's going to tell you to do. And it does work really well. And it gets them to upchuck whatever they've just eaten that they shouldn't have. So basically, when you call your vet, they're either going to tell you to use a syringe. It doesn't hurt to have a big one laying around. I actually bought a couple on Amazon, so I have these big syringes that I got from a garden center. I tend to do it with chicken broth because I have it in my cupboard, and it's easy, and the dog drinks up the hydrogen peroxide really quickly with that. So the measurement that your vet will give you is 1/2 to 1 milliliter per pound for your pet. So if you're talking about a 50-pound dog, you're going to have 1.5 to 3.5 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide to administer, to give your dog. So you can put that in a syringe or a turkey baster. What I like to do is I like to take a 1/4 cup of broth and put it in there, and then the dog laps it up really quickly without having to chase them down and stick the syringe in their mouth, and that can become difficult, especially if the dog is hyper like Lily. Little Yorkie, she doesn't like me messing with her face, so it's really hard for me. It would be very hard for me to use the syringe for a dog like Lily. Now there are certain breeds, unless you're desperate, you may not want to try to get them to throw up. Pugs, dogs that have the pushed in faces, bulldogs, pugs, dogs like that, Shih Tzus, it's not always advised to try to get them to throw up, because when they throw up, they can also ingest it at the same time. So it's a little trickier with that, with certain breeds. But when you call your vet, you'll get that information. You want to make sure that your dog is not a breed that has a pushed in kind of nose, that like a pug or a bulldog, because oftentimes when they throw up, they have a chance of re-ingesting it through their nose because their faces are pushed in. So your vet will help you deal with that. So in deciding whether or not you should administer the hydrogen peroxide, number one, you're going to call your vet. Number two, you want to make sure that whatever it is has been recently ingested. You want to make sure your dog is healthy, not having any esophagus problems, digestive issues, so that you can make sure the process happens quickly, properly. And also you want to make sure your dog's asymptomatic. You don't want to induce vomiting in a dog that's passed out or dizzy. That could become a real problem. And you also want to make sure that what you've given your dog is poisonous to your dog. So, for example, if my dog ate a little bit of avocado, I would not induce vomiting unless it was the entire avocado and it's little Lily and she's eaten the pit and everything. That's a different story. But if my dog eats a little bit of avocado, it's probably not going to be an issue. May give her a little bit of a stomach ache. And maybe, who knows, maybe when she's out in the yard, she'll throw it up anyways. But that's not a situation that's critical. So you want to make sure that this is, you know, a big candy bar, a big chocolate bar has been ingested, or antifreeze or something like that. Because it isn't comfortable for your dog to be throwing up this hydrogen peroxide. It's not something you want to do regularly, and hopefully you never have to do it. But it is good to know about. Another thing, if your vet is unavailable to take a call in a situation where you're having a crisis, you can also call the ASPCA Poison Control Hotline, which I have called before, and it's free, and the advice they give you is very similar, if not the same, that your vet will give you. So the phone number, you should always keep that handy or an easy lookup. It's 888-426-4435. So maybe put that on a Post-it note and stick it inside your cupboard so that you have that available. And they will most likely give you that same advice about the hydrogen peroxide. And you want to make sure if you do the hydrogen peroxide, you want to make sure that it's fresh, it's not expired, that it's 3%. And also, if you administer it and you don't see any throwing up within the first 15 minutes, it's suggested to then do it again. And hopefully the second time you do it after the first 15 minutes, it will work.